Now, US Vice President JD Vance has warned world leaders against what he called significant regulation of artificial intelligence during a speech at the AI conference in Paris. He said it could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off. Mr. Vance said that the US will not only foster growth of AI technology, but also find ways to prevent adversaries from being able to use it to surveil and threaten people. His speech goes against calls from EU leaders for more regulation of the technology. Here's more of what he had to say.
Now, with the President's recent executive order on AI, we're developing an AI action plan that avoids an overly precautionary regulatory regime while ensuring that all Americans benefit from the technology and its transformative potential. Now, we invite your countries to work with us and to follow that model if it makes sense for your nations. However, the Trump administration is troubled by reports that some foreign governments are considering tightening the screws on U.S. tech companies with international footprints. Now, America cannot and will not accept that, and we think it's a terrible mistake, not just for the United States of America, but for your own countries.
Well, our correspondent, Lisa Lewis, in Paris, is following the summit. Welcome, Lisa. What else did Vice President Vance have to say?
Well, Mr. Vance said several times that he was against what he called excessive regulation. But apart from that, he also said that he didn't want any ideological bias when it comes to AI. And he said there needed to be free speech online, basically saying we need to trust people to have a normal conversation online and not control them. And then he also said, we need to have America first, basically governments, the US government supporting American companies so that they can stay, as he called them, the leader in the sector. At least that last part was reflected in some parts of the speeches here by European leaders at this summit. He was also saying, actually Europe first, or France first, and France and Europe are a good place to start, a good place to invest into AI in the future.
And how different are the American and EU approaches to AI development?
Well, I think it's fair to say that there is a huge gap between what the US is pushing for and what the EU has been pushing for. They actually have been saying, EU leaders here, that they want a certain amount of regulation, that AI needs to be ethical, human rights need to be taken into account, and AI also needs to be safe to a certain extent. When it comes to free speech, obviously the argument here in Europe is that yes, people can be trusted to discuss, but online there are algorithms that are automatically pushing hate speech, and these algorithms need to be regulated for everybody to be safe. So it looks like the two stances really are quite far away from each other.
Okay, lots of heads of state and national leaders there. I don't think that they're going to come out with anything that's actually binding. So will they actually be able to find common ground?
Well, you're right to say that there will be no binding resolution at the end of the summit here, but they might come out with a common text, a minimum consensus, so to say. You could argue, well, these two viewpoints are quite far away from each other. However, they also have both an interest actually to find common ground and to take things forward. As we heard from Mr. Vance, Vice President Vance, he said actually we don't want to go this alone. Obviously, the US wants the European leaders to follow their stance. However, you could also argue that maybe the US government is trying to push the furthest they can actually in these negotiations, just as we know it from President Donald Trump, who asks for a lot so that he gets most of it out of negotiations. So we will see if these two stances, if these two sides can come together and issue some kind of common ground resolution declaration at the end of the summit here in Paris.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Lisa Louis in Paris.